that can cause head trauma and the different classification or different types of the head trauma. And then we will see what actually occurs after the head trauma and different mechanisms of the injuries that occur after the head trauma. Then we will see what kind of presentation can be there if a patient comes with the head trauma, and what are the different investigations we gonna do for that patient. Then in the end we will be talking about the different types of treatment like medical or the surgical treatment and even the complication and the follow-up of a head injury patient. So introduction. So when we are talking about the neurocritical care, it's not only about the brain pathology but also the spinal pathologies. But actually, the spinal pathologies we will be discussing in the coming lectures as scheduled. So today we will be discussing mainly about the brain pathologies. And brain pathologies can be divided into two types. It can be a traumatic brain pathology or a non-traumatic brain pathology. Non-traumatic brain pathology like the brain tumors, they will be discussed in the coming lecture. So today we will be focused on the traumatic type of brain injuries. So what can the different etiologies that can cause head trauma? The most common one is, as you know, the road traffic accident. So in the recent past, we have seen that there is more urbanization and more automobile vehicles you can see on the roads. So uh, the more the automobile vehicles, more will be the road traffic accidents. So the second cause is uh, falls. Falls can occur more commonly in the children or old age patients. Then the violence can be there that can cause the head trauma like gunshots or abuse or the blunt head trauma. So then we can see that different types of explosive blast can be seen in the terrorist attacks or in the war zones. And in the end, we can also observe the head trauma in natural disaster like flood or earthquakes. So what can be the different types of head trauma? Head trauma can be divided differently into different parts, like it can be divided into primary or secondary type of head injuries. This primary and secondary type of head injury we'll discuss in the coming slides. We will start here with the open or the closed head injury. So open and the closed head injury basically is when there is breakage between the brain and the outer uh, environment, like if there is a break in the skin or the scalp and the fracture as well, so it will be an open type of head injury. But if there is closed type of but in closed type of head injuries, there will be no break in the scalp or there will be no fracture. So then another type, another classification can be focal or diffuse. Focal is all about injury that occurs in a particular part of the brain matter or a small area of the brain matter, but a diffuse injury can involve a larger parts of the brain or even the whole hemisphere. So then we can also classify according to the coup or counter coup injuries. Coup injury is on the side of the direct trauma, and the counter coup injury on the completely opposite side of the coup injury. That means the opposite side of the impact of the head trauma. So coup injury is on the side of the head trauma, and the counter coup is on the other side, and it is basically on the skull base mainly or the bony ridges. We can see the counter coup injuries. Then we can also divide the head injury into mild, moderate, and severe, and it is based on the Glasgow Coma score actually. So in the mild, we can see that it is from the GCS of 3 to 8, or sorry, it's the mild one is actually the 13 to 15 GCS. Then in the moderate, we can see from 9 to 12 will be the moderate type of head injuries, and in the severe ones, they are actually below 9 GCS. So mild, moderate, and severe types of head injury can be classified according to the GCS. Then in the last, we can divide the brain injuries into hemorrhagic types and non-hemorrhagic types. If we see the non-hemorrhagic, there are two types. One is concussion or diffuse external injury, where we actually do not see any hemorrhagic lesions. But in the hemorrhagic type of head injury, we can see the extradural hematoma, subdural hematoma, subacnoid hemorrhages, contusions, interparenchymal bleeds, or even the intraventricular bleeds. So these are the different types of the head injury. So the presentation of the patient can be from a very mild symptom to the very severe, like the comatose patients. So the milder symptoms can be the headaches or vertigo or mild dizziness, also, or single or two episodes of the vomiting. These can be the mild symptom. But in the severe symptom, a patient can have a severe type of head trauma, severe type of vertigo, multiple episodes of the vomiting, and even the seizures can be there, or patient can be brought unconscious, or there can be weakness or neurological deficit on a side of the patient, like arms or legs, or even the numbness can be there. Then we can also see, so these are the different symptoms of the a patient with the head trauma. Then we can also see that the patient can be confused or agitated, or there can be memory loss associated with the head trauma, or the slurred speech. So what are the red flags? What are the important things you have to note about a patient coming with the head trauma to seek an urgent medical attention or urgent neurosurgical attention? So when we see the patient in our neurotrauma unit, we actually be focused on the red flags. So these red flags can be an episodes of unconsciousness after the head trauma. It can be an episode of single or multiple episodes of seizures, multiple episodes of vomiting, and the ear, nose, or throat bleed, and a slurred speech or a neurological deficit of arms or legs. So these are the red flags, especially the initial four ones are the very important red flag signs we see. And if we see any of them in a patient coming with head trauma, we should be alert to see the CT scans and other investigations for this patient, because this is very important to be focusing on the red flags. So there is a doctrine. This is called the Monroe Kelly doctrine. So it states that the skull is a closed cavity. It's a closed hard cavity, and it can uh, have a fixed amount of volume inside it. So that fixed amount of volume inside it actually is completed by the three components of the brain. So, so one is the brain itself, or the brain parenchyma. Second component is the CSF, and third component is blood. So these three are the main components that occupy the skull of an adult or a human being. So these three, one is brain, another is CSF, and third one is the blood. So blood can be further divided into venous blood and the arterial blood. So this is a normal component of the skull. But if there is a fourth component, that is an abnormal component, comes in the skull, it can be a hemorrhagic one, it can be a pathological one, like the brain tumors or abscess or any infectious source. So if a fourth thing, that is we call here the mass. So if a mass comes inside the skull, so the volume of the normal components of the skull will have to be decreased to accommodate this mass. So the easiest most to to go out is the CSF. So as the mass increases, the first of all the CSF will go out to accommodate this mass. If this mass increases further in size, the CSF will go out the maximum it can, and then it will shift the blood component of the brain from interior of the skull to the exterior. So the volume of the blood inside the skull will be decreased to accommodate the mass. So these two will go initially, first of all CSF, then the blood. And in the last, if the mass further increases and the maximum amount of CSF and the blood is already gone out, so in the last part there will be a shifting of the brain from inside to outside, and it is called the herniation of the brain. So this is the last stage, and it is an irreversible stage. Once the herniation of brain occurs, it's an irreversible stage. So we are more focusing on the initial two stages. One is the CSF stage and the blood stage. Here we have to do different interventions to save our patients. So another pathophysiology is about the autoregulation of the cerebral blood flow. Uh, as we can see, the cerebral perfusion pressure is equal to mean arterial pressure minus intracranial pressure. So there is auto-regulation of the cerebral blood flow in a non-injured patient. It actually auto-regulates the amount of blood or the cerebral blood flow over a different range of mean arterial pressure. If a mean arterial pressure remains between 50 to 150 millimeter of mercury, it is auto-regulated by the brain itself, and the amount of blood required by the brain is maintained. But above that level or below that level, so auto-regulation mechanism fail and there is ischemia. Even the higher mean arterial pressure can cause ischemia due to the pressure, and even the low or the low mean arterial pressure below 50, there will be loss of auto-regulation and there can be chances of ischemia as well. So here we can see the different types of herniation and mass effect. First of all, we will talking about the mass effect as we saw previously when we were discussing about the Monro-Kelly doctrine. Here you can see the red component or the epidural hematoma is there. So it is occupying the skull cavity. So it's an extra component that is not a normal component. So once it is there, it will cause the shifting of the normal component of the brain. So first of all, it cause the mass effect, and then if there is uh, so after the mass effect, it will cause the flow of the CSF from inside brain to the outside. So the volume of the CSF will decrease. Then it will cause the shifting of the blood, and in the last, it will cause the herniation. And the herniation of the brain can be of different types. Mainly, we divide it into the four types, where, as you can see here, the label 1, 2, 3, and 4. So one is the subfalcine herniation. It is below the falx cerebri, and from one side or the from one hemisphere towards the opposite hemisphere because of the mass effect on the same side. In the type 2, this is the central herniation, and the type 3 is the uncal or the transtentorial herniation. It occurs due to the mass effect and from the supratentorial component to the infratentorial component. And in the last, there is tonsillar herniation. uh, if the After the mass effect, the tonsillar herniation occurs and it shifts the brain brain from the cranial cavity towards the spinal cord. So this is the tonsillar herniation. Here we can see again the four different types of the cerebral herniation. One is subfalcine, then second is central herniation, third is transtentorial herniation, and fourth is the tonsillar herniation. So now coming to the primary and secondary types of brain injury. Primary brain injury occurs at the time of head injury. Uh, it can be of different types like fractures, like hemorrhages, epidural, subdural, contusion, interventional hemorrhage. These actually occur at the time of the primary head injuries, and diffuse axonal injury can also occur at the time of primary head injury. So primary head injury is all about the trauma and its effects at the time of impact. But the secondary head injury follows the primary head injury once the head trauma is over, and there are secondary changes inside the brain due to that trauma, and it can cause the secondary type of head injuries. And it can be due to systemic hypotension, hypoxia, elevated or increasing ICP, or the microscopic biomechanical cascade following the cellular injuries like the cerebral edema. So these will be the causes of the secondary type of head injuries. So we cannot prevent the primary type of head injury being in an hospital, because the primary type of head injuries can only be prevented by the safety measures like helmet wearing or the seat belt wear. But we are talking about the hospital management, so we can only prevent the secondary type of head injury. So our main focus is on the secondary head injuries and its prevention. So we have to decrease or prevent the secondary type of head injuries. And so initially when we see a patient in the emergency departments, whenever a patient comes with a trauma, like even a limb trauma or head trauma or abdominal trauma or any other part of the body is involved in a trauma, we deal the patient with a protocol. We call it the ATLS protocol or ATLS guideline. It is an advanced trauma life support guideline. So there are different component of the ATLS. It is the different parts. One is the primary and the secondary survey. So in the primary survey, we see the five components. We see the A, B, C, D, E. A is all about the airway with C spine or cervical spine stabilization. B is about the breathing. C is about the circulation. D is the disability, where we see the GCS and the pupils. And E is about the exposure. We do log roll and see from head to toe and examine patient from head to toe to see the hidden injuries. So this is the primary survey. We deal the patient with any type of head injury and especially the head trauma with the ATLS guideline. So after the initial survey or the primary survey, we go on the to the secondary survey, and then we focus on the type of injury, or like if it involves the head, we focus on the head injury and do the different examinations, and then we start investigation. So what we do once the patient is with us, we do the evaluation. Evaluation is mainly initially based on the Glasgow Coma scale, and then we go, and along with this we can also see the pupils and different types of body reactions like movements of the body, and then we can see the radiology, and in the last we can go for the intracranial pressure monitoring as well to evaluate the head injury. So neurological assessment is mainly focused on the Glasgow Coma scale. So here we can see the different components of the GCS. The one component is eye opening, second is verbal response, and the last is the best motor response. There are different grades of the Glasgow Coma scale. Here you can see different scores. Eye has a maximum of 4 and a minimum of 1. Verbal has a maximum of 5 score and a minimum of 1. Similarly, best motor response has a maximum score of 6 and a minimum score of 1. So the minimum score a patient can have is 3. It's not 0, but it's 3. So a GCS can be as minimum as 3, but it can be a maximum of 15. That will be uh, a- the maximum or a normal GCS score. So what can be other presentation? We have to also assess different cranial nerves as well to see or to localize the traumatic brain injury inside the cranial cavity. So here we can see that we have to see the pupillary reflexes and the reactivity like isochoric or the dilated pupils or the reactivity of the pupil. Are they reacting to the light or non-reactive? So we have to see the pupillary reflexes and reactivity. Then we have to see the ocular movements, or the ocular movements are they normal or abnormal. Then we have to see the facial palsy, if there is any facial palsy after the head trauma or not. Hearing loss can be assessed in a patient with the head trauma, and then we can see the ability of a patient uh, to swallow. Other components that can be involved in the examination are the flexor and extensor posturing of the body, spasticity or the flaccidity, uh, or can be seen more unusually, but there can be echinacea or rigidity of the body. There can be tremors or dystonia of the body, postural inability or imbalancing, or like a difficulty in standing uh, can be there in the patient with the head traumas. So then we can see sensory examination. The corneal reflexes can be added in the examination in a head injury patient. So the investigation, we do different types of investigation. One are the simple baseline investigation, like we go for the blood sampling, chest X-rays, and ultrasound when a patient comes with the head trauma or multi-organ trauma. But focusing on the head injury, we go for the radiological investigation. We go for skull X-rays and the CT scan. Today, generally, we have CT scans available all over the tertiary care hospital. So this is the initial type of investigation, and even we do not go for the simple skull X-rays, but we have to add the cervical spine X-ray because it can be a hidden injury along with the head trauma. So the CT scan or the computerized tomography scan, it's a gold standard technique to evaluate the head injury. So it's a non-contrast scan, and we have to see from the base of the occiput to the top of the vertex in a 5 mm or 1 mm increment. What do I mean by 5 mm or 1 mm? It is the difference between the two slides or the two slices of the CT scan. So ideal is to go as minimum score as possible. But the best thing we can do is a 5 mm CT scan. And there are two different types of windows we usually go for as for the patient with the head trauma. One is the bone window and other is the tissue window, or we call it the brain window. So in the bone window, here you can see what actually you are seeing here is the brain window, where we can see different components of the brain itself. But in the bone window, we do not see the brain component but only the bone component. So both of these windows or both of these scans should be done in at the initial as the initial CT scan. So what are the different types of hematomas you can see, or the injuries you can see in the patient with head trauma? It can be starting from the um, outside. It can be a simple laceration of the skull of the scalp, or it can be a simple fracture, linear fracture of the skull, or coming inside the skull. You can see the epidural hematomas, subdural hematomas, subarachnoid hematomas, the intracerebral hematoma or the contusions, and in the end we can also see the interventricular hemorrhage. So there are different types. So these are different types of hemorrhagic or traumatic type of brain injury we can see in a patient with head trauma. So after the CT scan, we can also do ICP monitoring to see the intracranial pressure inside the skull. If intracranial pressure is increased, we can suspect different mass occupying the skull cavity and increasing the intracranial pressure. So the intracranial pressure monitoring is a very important is component of the neurocritical care, especially in patients who are unconscious or occupying the ICU setup of the neurosurgery units. So there are different types of ICP monitoring. ICP monitoring actually it's the intracranial pressure monitoring. Intracranial pressure is the pressure inside the skull. It can be monitored at different levels. Like it can be monitored at a level that is epidurally. So so the probe or the transducer will be put inside the skull, uh, inside the skull bone, but outside the dura mater. So it will be an epidural or extradural probe. Similarly, we can put a probe in a subdural space. We can uh, uh, put a probe in the parenchyma or the inside ventricles. So the ideal type of ICP monitoring uh, is a ventricular monitoring. So we put a probe inside the ventricle and measure the ICP. So it's the easiest one and the ideal one in cases of the ICP monitoring. We put a probe inside the ventricle and we attach it with the monitor, which can assess the different waves of the pressure inside the brain and also the measurement of the pressure. So the normal pressure is between 5 and 15 millimeter of mercury. So this is the normal ICP. If the ICP increases above that, we call it the raised ICP. So what are the treatment options? So generally we go for two types of treatments. One is the medical treatment and second one is the surgical treatment. Medical treatment is started initially even if we have to go for the surgical treatment. So medical treatment starts uh, when patient arrives in the emergency department. We go for the IV lines and start pushing the IV fluids, and then we can go for the mannitol or hypertonics line to decrease the intracranial pressure. Similarly, we can add on the anticonvulsants, especially if there is parenchymal injury or the parenchymal hemorrhage, and we have to apply oxygen supplementation as well. And if there is open type of head injury or another injury of different any part of the body that is open type of injury, we have to go for the antibiotics as well. And for the pain management, we go for analgesias. And if a patient stays longer in the neurocritical units, we have to be taking care about the nutrition as well. But nursing of a head injury patient is very important and pressure care should be done. And the nursing involves the elevation of head up to 30 to 45 degrees and on the and the and it should be nursed on the side of on the one side, right lateral or the left lateral, to avoid the aspiration after the vomiting. So now coming to the surgery. Surgery, if there is a mass effect, that is the hemorrhagic mass inside the cranial cavity and it has a specific amount of volume. Generally, we take it as a 30 ml volume or 25 to 30 ml volume. If a hematoma inside the cranial cavity have a volume of 25 to 30 ml, we usually go for the surgeries. But it all depends on the location of the hematoma. Even a smaller hematoma in infratentorial compartment should be evacuated. But in the supratentorial compartment, we usually go for hematomas that are large enough to a volume of 25 to 30 ml. So this is, as you can see, the skin incision. It's we call it a trauma flap. We go for a inverted question mark incision. We start from the anterior to the tragus, right at the zygomatic arch, and then we go above the pinna and curve it behind the ear, and then go up towards the vertex, and then come to the front, uh, just below the hairline. So this is a large traumatic flap. We usually go for this in the head injuries on the one side of the hemisphere. So this type of incision or flap can be used in cases of epidural hematomas, subdural hematomas, or large contusions. So first we uh, cut off or dissect the different layers of the scalp, and we go deep to the bone. Muscle can uh, be left intact or attached to the bone, or we can simply elevate the muscle as well, and then we start doing the uh, burr holes. We make uh, 4 to 5 burr holes generally, depending on the size of the craniotomy we are planning. So we initially we go for the burrows, and then we join them. After joining them, the bone is removed, and we are on the extradural component. So if a hemorrhage is extradural, so it will be in front of us after removing the bone, and we can evacuate the hematoma, secure the bleeding site, and then we close or put back the bone, and we apply uh, sutures, or we can also go for the plating of the bone to secure the bone, and then we uh, resuture the scalp. But in cases of, like here you can see, we have closed the bone, and then we will put the scalp and stitch them. But in cases of the subdural hematomas, we have to open the dura as well, and then we remove the hematoma that is subdurally. So we apply sutures, we close the skin. Uh, a drain can be placed if we are not sure about the hemostasis, or if there is minimum oozing of the blood to avoid the recollection of the hematomas. But generally, it is not needed in cases of the head trauma. So now after treatment, we are coming to the complication of head trauma. Complication of head trauma can be the functional or psychological or physical. So it can be insomnia, cognitive decline can be there, post-traumatic headaches or depressions is common, and we can see the post-traumatic seizures, especially in cases of the parenchymal injuries or brain contusions or ventricular intraventricular large hematomas. Then we can also see the hydrocephalus after the head trauma, because if there is intraventricular hemorrhage, it can block the CSF flow and it can cause the hydrocephalus. So it's one of the complication of the traumatic brain injury. Then heterotropic or abnormal ossification of the bones can be there. DVT can be there if a patient is nursed long on the long on bed, then DVT can be there. Spasticity of the body parts can be there, and it can be avoided with the help of the physiotherapies. And then the GI complication can be there, especially Cushing ulcers that occurs after the head injuries. And in the last, we can also see the gait abnormalities in cases of the head injury. So after the treatment, we have to tell the patient, or we have to organize rehabilitation for the patient as well, especially in the patient with the severe or the moderate type of head injuries. So different types of rehabilitation can be there, like it can be a physical therapy, it can be occupational therapy, it can be social, speech therapies, or even the psychosocial therapies can be involved in the rehabilitation components. So, and it can be prolonged for days to months or even the years depending on the condition of the patient. So it's all about neurocritical care. In the last, we can do the follow-ups, and the follow-ups of the simple hematomas or milder type of head injuries can be stopped after a single or two visits. But in cases of severe type of head injuries, or especially when the patient is in vegetative state or low or with the low GCS after the treatment, it can need a prolonged type of follow-up as well if for months or even years. So thank you for any question or query.